The double spin dynamic. By now you should have a good understanding of the satanic spin. In brief, the satanic spin is a technique Satan uses to get good people to do bad things. If you have not learned about this concept, it is explained in detail in my book, Like Dragons Did They Fight. I strongly recommend you get a copy right away and learn this concept and how to beat it. To understand the double spin principle, you will also need to understand the Tetris miscommunication principle described above. This is a combination of those two ideas. When Satan wants to cause significant miscommunication between two people, especially married people, he starts by getting one of the partners into a spin. The spin starts to cause subtle chemical reactions within the individual, level 1, which can then turn into strong negative feelings, level 2, which then makes the individual susceptible to suggestions to misbehave, including the unnecessary and counterproductive fight, flight, or freeze behaviors, level 3, followed by an irrational conversation in one's mind, a debate over whether or not to go that far, level 4, and finally, allowing oneself to mishandle the situation, anger, sarcasm, anything unedifying, level 5. At this moment, the worlds of the two partners collide, like the landing wheel of an airplane when it hits the runway. It's almost as if someone planned it. As you might guess, it's really hard to keep the spirit in the conversation when this happens. It is not difficult for Satan to take advantage of this moment. Using a well-known psychological concept called classical conditioning, Satan pairs an inaccurate interpretation for the listener with an inaccurate behavior of the speaker. It shouldn't surprise anyone that the receiver hears something like, "He is being mean to you on purpose," or "She just wants to criticize everything," etc. This flash in the mind of the listener usually starts a high-speed satanic spin of their own, which leads to a 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 chemical scale transition ending in misbehavior. Now this person becomes the giver and the other person is the receiver. I have seen this go back and forth at lightning speed. The negative intensity can grow quite rapidly. Once both are on the verge of losing their minds, I usually have to jump in to slow things down. Unfortunately, people tend to say and do lots of unfortunate things during this stage. Also, unfortunately, the human brain tends to memorize such unfortunate events. It can cause long-term trauma. It makes me very sad. To break this cycle, or to keep it from happening in the first place, each individual has to take strict responsibility for keeping themselves from sliding into a spin. This requires a great deal with self-awareness and, more often than not, a good amount of training. Each person also needs to resign themselves to the possibility that the other person can slip into a spin, even if it's not your fault. When Satan attacks, more often than not, he takes good things and works to twist them off course. Men, as referred to in the Proclamation on the Family, have been given stewardships that include the 3 P's: preside, provide, protect. In order to fulfill these stewardships, they need an emotional foundation of confidence and a sense of competence. In other words, they feel, quote, "I know how to do it, and I believe I can do it," unquote. If you haven't noticed, it is not uncommon that a young man, or one not so young, often has, at least on the surface, an overabundance of confidence and competence. This is experienced as pride, but in its healthy form, a man enters the adult world with the belief that he can make enough money to feed and house himself, a wife, and children, provide. He may even believe he can keep them safe from all bad things that could happen to them, protect, and lead them back to the celestial world, preside. At the same time, women, as referred to by the Proclamation of the Family, are specifically designed to nurture. In order to fulfill their stewardship, they need an emotional foundation of safety and security. It has been my observation that women become naturally nurturing when they feel safe and secure. When this system works correctly, it is an amazingly powerful and edifying feedback loop for both. If a man is able to successfully preside, provide, and protect, his wife will feel increasingly safe and secure. As the woman feels safe and secure, she nurtures her husband, which in turn inspires and motivates him to work harder to preside, provide, and protect even more. It is a cycle that is fun to be a part of until something goes wrong. Let's use a medieval scenario to illustrate what could go wrong. First, let us zoom in the camera on the knight in shining armor, out in the dark forests and fields, fighting off dragons that are seeking to attack his queen in his castle. With great valiance, he's able to kill 99 of the 100 attacks on him and his family. But lo, a single dragon gets past him, runs into the castle, and chews on his wife and perhaps even a child. As you might guess, our hero is in very good spirits on his way home from the battlegrounds. He is aware that he must be the greatest of all knights in shining armor because he accomplished such an amazing feat. His sense of confidence and competence are at an all-time high. He is confident that his sweet queen will welcome him home with a very warm welcome. But, as you might also guess, when he gets home, his hopes are dashed because, quote, all she wants to talk about is the one mistake I made. Why can't she appreciate all the work I did to kill the 99 dragons? Instead, she just wants to talk about the one mistake. Why do I even try? Unquote. Over time, the queen and her child heal as best they could. Sadly, the horns in the towers blare in warning that there is another wave of dragons coming toward the kingdom. In the past, the queen has had full confidence in her knight in shining armor, but after what happened last time, she is more worried. So, to be helpful, she shares with him her concerns and wants to review his plan for her protection. She says she is worried, which in twisted man talk means, I don't believe you can do it. She says she is scared, which in twisted man talk means, I don't believe you know how to win. She feels an urgency to talk until he takes her concerns seriously. At this time, if it is not sharp in your mind, review the section of this book called The Tetris Miscommunication Principle. While the woman is talking, sharing her worries and her fears, Satan takes this opportunity to adjust the meaning of her words so that the knight experiences them as offensive. For most women, this is both confusing and shocking. What they expect to experience is a hero-type response. They are hoping to hear, I understand your fears and I will fight to protect you. Instead, men are often offended or insulted. What they hear is some version of, you are not good enough, you are a failure as a husband and as a man, I don't believe you can keep me safe and secure. Not only does this sound unpleasant in the ears, it also comes accompanied by a slam of chemicals in the body not much different than seeing a policeman with his lights on in your rearview mirror. See Satanic Spin and Like Dragons Did They Fight. In both male and female brains, the upper frontal lobe is the part of the brain where we function at our highest level. In addition to many other functions, it is this part of the brain where we have compassion, advanced problem solving, insight, and the like. When functioning originates here, word choice is more careful, more accurate. The chemical experience that a man experiences at this time of insult or offense does not only give him an emotional experience, but also a bioneurological experience, which I am convinced is intentional on the part of Satan. Unknowingly, the frontal lobe of the brain starts to shut down, while regions of the brain closer to the midbrain start to wake up. This survival brain, the animal brain, self-defense brain, encourages the man to think and talk in terms of fight, flight, or freeze. As you can imagine, when a man fights with the woman he is supposed to protect, she does not feel safe or secure. When he waves a hand at her and walks away in hopelessness, she does not feel safe or secure. If he sits there frozen and unengaging, she does not feel safe or secure. Of course, Satan cannot help but get involved at this moment, so his next attack is on her. Some women experience insult and offense similar to men, but most of the women I have met are more vulnerable to fear. My wife pointed out to me that it is very common in the scriptures that when a revelation is being delivered to a woman, she is told right from the beginning, be not afraid. There is a time and a place where fear is the correct response. There is also the possibility that there is more fear than necessary. It is a challenge for women to discern where their fear is a message from God and where their fear is magnified by Satan. Let it be known to any men who might be reading this, if you are the man who has hurt her, it is not your place to tell her she is overreacting. In the same way you want to have your direct relationship with God respected, you will need to respect hers. If she is overreacting, let the Holy Ghost tell her. So the cycle continues. For the man to break the cycle, he is going to have to watch for the sensation of insult. At first I thought it was just me, but I have since learned that almost every man I work with is greatly benefited by putting an alarm on the sensation of insult. There are other names for it: offended, bugged, irritated, frustrated, overwhelmed, nagged, annoyed, etc. I would expect a man who wants to improve things to look for what fits best for him. You will find that the steps to take from here match what I have taught in other writings when referring to, quote, mood battles, unquote, or, quote, level 2 battles, unquote. Step 1. Notice it. This is the shortest step. It is just an alarm. Something is wrong. I am off. I strongly encourage people to say hello to Satan at this point. I have a significant paradigm shift when I can remember that the only time I feel this way is when he is present, because the woman I married would never insult me on purpose. She is a good woman and does not want to cause me emotional pain intentionally any more than I would want to do so to her. If she is not trying to stimulate this emotion in me, who is? I have already figured out in advance that it is always the leader of the dark side, who always wants to mess up my marriage. Jerk. Step 2. Name it. As with other mood battles, step 2 is done in advance, so it can be quickly done in the moment. Men, especially, are not naturally skilled at mood awareness. Becoming familiar with feelings or moods in advance makes it easier to identify them when they surface. It is here where I continue the conversation with Satan. Where are you headed with this? What are you trying to accomplish? Are you trying to push me into a fight, flight, or freeze mode so I can look stupid at the same time I scare my own woman? Are you trying to increase my negative feelings? Step 3. Flip it. Name in advance, if possible, emotions, feelings, or moods that are the opposite of what you were experiencing. What feelings are the opposite of insulted, offended, bugged, irritated, frustrated, overwhelmed, nagged, and annoyed? Perhaps patient, compassionate, encouraging, protective. Let's pick up the conversation with Satan. My wife is scared. How about I protect her? My wife is overwhelmed. How about I soothe her? My wife made a mistake in communication that will embarrass her later. How about I be the one person in her life that doesn't rub it in? How about I have compassion for her pain and fear instead of running away from her, fighting with her, or just freezing like a bump on the log? Step 4. Find it. It is a good start to get the words, level 4, and the thoughts, level 3, part of the process started. But to completely win the battle, you might have to fight to get your feelings, level 2, and chemicals, level 1, involved. Push yourself until you feel compassion, understanding of her pain and fear, and protection, triggering the manly chemicals of drive to make sure she is safe and secure from both you and any demons that are working to torment her. Level 5. Actions need not be perfect, but you can become more and more skilled with doing and or saying the right thing. Let's bring these steps into application with the knight in shining armor story. As the queen starts to share her concerns about the safety and security of herself and the others in the castle, the knight notices that he is starting to feel a negative emotion as she is talking. Instead of slipping toward fight, flight, or freeze with his favorite woman, he remembers that a 7,000-year-old jerk is trying to mess up his marriage. Just as she expects him to become unpleasant, he softens and becomes more serious. He turns toward her and takes her by the hands and says something like, I want to make sure you are okay. Is there anything else you are worried about? Of course, she is stunned into silence at first. She is unaware of the war inside his mind where he is successfully becoming compassionate and feeling protective of her, but she can see kindness and fervor in his eyes. Your safety and security are my primary concern. I will do whatever it takes. If he is convincing, her own body chemistry will soften very quickly. If he has a history of making broken promises, he will have to prove himself, but instead of taking insult to this, he will become even more compassionate about her distrust and even more determined to learn how to protect her. If the woman wishes to break the cycle, she will need to take the same 4 steps, but with different emotions involved. Step 1. Notice it. My heart is beating faster. I am feeling an intensity growing inside of me. Panic is growing inside me. I invite the woman to do the same thing as the men at this point. Once your alarm goes off, say hi to Satan. Hi, what are you doing here? Of course she already knows the answer, something like, the same thing I have done in other situations like this. This awareness will start her on the path of making sure she maintains clarity of mind, no matter how true the statements are about her husband's inadequacies. Step 2. Name it. I am afraid. I am hurt. I am scared. The man who is supposed to provide for me and protect me is not doing his job. Again, the more accurately aware she is of her feelings in advance, the better she will be at handling them in the moment of battle. Step 3. Flip it. I don't need to be afraid. I am a strong woman. I could cross the plains by myself if I had to, like my pioneer sister ancestors. I could provide for and protect my family by myself if I had to. I am not weak. She, too, can tap into some compassion by remembering she is married to a good man who is trying to get it right. I should repeat the disclaimer here that this entire book is based on the premise that both the husband and the wife want to improve the marriage and want to be good people as individuals. He is trying to provide for me and my family, but he has mortal limitations. He is trying to protect me from evil, but he is mortal. He is getting better and better a little bit at a time. Step 4. I have seen a pattern that almost every woman I have ever met can see divine potential in her husband. She really believes that he can become perfect. She believes that he can perfectly provide for, and protect her and her children. It is quite the compliment, until we mess it up. All women try to be patient with their men as they work their way toward becoming perfect, but it is rather inconvenient when they aren't there yet. Sometimes his inadequacies are just inconvenient, but other times they are scary or hurtful. To find the right state of mind and heart, she will have to objectively, emotionally assess what her man does bring to the journey and what he does not. As with a journey across the plains, she needs to clear-headedly assess what resources he brings to her wagon. I recommend she assess his resources by what she sees him do instead of what he says he is going to do. Men don't want to be liars, but we do want to be gods also, and sometimes we promise more than we can do. We want to be trusted. We want to be relied upon. Sometimes we are impatient with our own lack of godliness. When a woman observes that her man is not enough yet, I encourage her to find the resources she needs within herself, instead of sliding toward fear and hurt. These resources are going to have to come from the divine source. As you might guess, we are going to experience situations where neither the man nor the woman have the resources to meet the needs. This puts them both in the same situation that many pioneer couples found themselves in. It is best to stay close, to remain friends, while they pray together for God to use his compensating power to fill in the gaps. Sometimes the two get to watch a miracle. Sometimes they have an opportunity to grieve together. More on this later. When a man has hurt a woman, Parable of the Southern Belle. This story could take place anywhere, but it works best for me if I imagine a father sitting on the front porch of his plantation-style home in the South. He looks down the long gravel drive lined by large trees on both sides. He sees an old sports car driving a little faster than usual up the drive, which comes to a gravel-flinging stop by the porch. The teenage girl, who happens to be the man's daughter, jumps out of the passenger seat and yells at the young man who has been driving, "I hate you, and I never want to see you again." As she slams the door and starts to run up the steps into the house, he opens his door and over the roof of the car hollers, "I'm sorry, I didn't mean to hurt you." The father, just like you would, gentlemen, reaches for his shotgun that he keeps on the porch, just in case. The young man sees what the father is doing, jumps back in the car, and drives away as fast as he can. The father pulls the trigger a few times, but misses on purpose. His only goal is to scare the boy away forever. That night he holds his daughter in his arms and hopes to console her. Why do boys have to be so stupid? And with a deep breath he remembers to himself, just like I was at that age. The next day the father gets quite a surprise. Once again the father is on his porch when he sees that same car slowly driving up the gravel drive. He reaches for his gun and takes the proper position on the middle step. The young man slowly gets out of his car. "You got a lot of nerve coming back here, young man," the father says. "You won't be talking to my daughter today, nor ever, so why don't you get back in that fancy car of yours and drive away before I put some holes in you and your car?" Meekly but bravely the young man replies with, "I am not here to talk to your daughter, sir. I am here to talk to you." This shocks the father a bit, who after a spell of silence asks, "Well, what is it you want to say?" The young man looks up for the first time to make eye contact with the father and says, "I feel really bad for hurting your daughter. She is really important to me, and I made an immature mistake. Before I try to make it up to her, sir, I want to make it up to you. What would you have me do, sir?" The father, even more surprised, pauses for a moment to ponder. He has no interest in putting his daughter in harm's way by allowing this young man to see his daughter again. But at the same time, this father has never seen such wisdom and courage in a young man. For that matter, he remembers that when he was that age, he would not have handled the situation this well. Also, there's the question, is this young man a flash in the pan with enthusiasm, or is he willing to back up his words with actions? So a little test. All right, young man, I want you to take that fancy car of yours, drive down to town square, take one of your clean white t-shirts and write on it real big, I hurt blank, and I am willing to do whatever it takes to fix it. Then attach that shirt like a flag to the town flagpole and raise it up high. Then take a picture of it with your fancy phone camera and post it on Facebook for all to see, okay? Now, if you haven't already guessed, the initial intent of this list of expectations is just to get rid of the kid. No punk teenager is going to follow through with those instructions. To his surprise, the young man replies, "Yes, sir." He jumps in his car and drives away. 30 minutes later, the father, just out of curiosity, checks his Facebook and finds that the young man has followed through. Well, how about that? What does that mean about this kid? He must seriously love the girl. He is brave. He is humble. Impressive, so far. The next day, the father sees the young man driving up the gravel road again. "What can I do for you next to prove myself to you?" See those fallen trees over there? See that axe? I need that all split into firewood for the winter. Have at it. Why is the father having him do these things? If the young man continues on this path, how is the father going to talk with the daughter? How does it benefit the father and the daughter if the young man gets impatient and drives away, never to come back? How does it benefit the father and the daughter if the young man stays patient and persistent? If the young man continues to work to build a relationship with the father will come to several conclusions. He respects me, therefore I can trust him to respect my daughter. When he is here, he is not off chasing other girls or other immature distractions. If consistent, the father will start having conversations with his daughter about the impressive character of the young man. The father wants his daughter to stay away from the young man until he demonstrates true character change. Once he demonstrates that he will be a better man than the other alternatives for his daughter, he will begin to encourage her to give the young man another chance. Most women are naturally forgiving once they feel safe. In my experience, that sense of safety will not come directly from the man, but must come as a spiritual manifestation for the woman. Imagine if the young man says to the father on the first day he comes back to the house, "Get out of the way, old man, and let me talk to your daughter." Or, "This is none of your business, we don't need to involve you." Or, "I don't trust your ability to convince her of my value. I need to tell her straightforward that I am a good man and she needs to get over what happened." In my professional experience, those couples who let the father be the mediator are much more likely to experience a miracle of recovery and happy healing than the others who are impatient and work around him. Hit by a truck. How should a wife respond to discovering her husband has been misbehaving significantly? What should she be allowed to expect? When discovering your husband has been using pornography, otherwise known as when you get hit by a truck, scream. When an individual is hit by a truck, initially it does not really matter why the driver hit you with the truck. Pain is pain. Before you have time to figure out how much damage has been done, before you have time to figure out why the truck hit you, you have the right to have a strong emotional reaction. I do not expect someone who has been hit by a truck to control their expressions of pain just to make it easier on the driver of the truck. And if the driver of the truck says, "You shouldn't scream so loud because it was an accident. The only reason I hit you with the truck is because of my addiction to alcohol, so I need you to not react but be supportive instead," I don't think I need to explain why that is crazy talk. Some pornography users and addicts justify not telling their spouses because it has nothing to do with her. Sure, an alcohol drinker can hide it from his spouse and believe that what she doesn't know won't hurt her, but is that really true? Does the drinker think that the time and money spent on the drinking and not with the family is unnoticeable? Does he think there are no changes in the way he thinks, feels, and behaves? Withdraw to a safe distance. Get out of the road and into a hospital. Get some distance between you and the person who has hurt you. Contact someone who might be able to help you. Hopefully you have a constructive relationship with your parents and/or church leader. These people can help you get to the help you need. They are like an ambulance. Ask them to help you get to a well-trained doctor who will know how to accurately diagnose your injuries and help you begin healing correctly. Unfortunately, some people just walk home after being hit by a truck and just try to recover or heal on their own. I understand why you don't want to get professional help, the embarrassment, the cost. Unfortunately, broken bones often heal incorrectly when professional help is not involved, leading to long-lasting discomfort. Please get a professional involved, even if it is for just one visit. Discover the extent of the damage. Unfortunately, it is going to take time to get the full extent of the disloyalty. Alcohol, drug, and porn users are not known for open and honest full disclosure on the first visit. Unfortunately, this is part of the addiction. As an addiction develops, the ability to distort truth and reality increases. During the early stages of recovery, the addict is usually still more concerned about avoiding the pain of watching you be in pain. I often hear them say, "I should never have told her, it only made things worse for me." Almost universally, the truth comes out in layers. As the user or addict gains more courage and integrity, he will gradually reveal more. It has been my experience that women are capable of getting a signal from God when they have heard all they need to hear. Until you feel this way, keep some distance, especially emotional distance, from the man until you get the signal from God that you have heard all you need to hear. Otherwise, he could very well accidentally run you over again. Scientifically speaking, in order to help a woman heal, the wife and I will need to know what types of behaviors have gone on, as well as the frequency and duration. The wife and I do not need graphic details. These tend to cause the most unnecessary trauma. The man involved, the user or addict, often unknowingly insults his wife during this process by deciding what information she can and cannot handle. Usually, unknowingly, the man adds insult to injury when he communicates, "I can't run you over at all without you screaming out in pain about it, so I am going to do both of us a favor by not telling you about it." I should comment here on a concept I have previously discussed in other materials called the creepy guy detector. You know that game that little toddlers play, where they put their hands over their eyes and declare, "You can't see me"? I observe situations where the man misbehaves significantly and then hopes that the woman cannot tell. I am convinced that in many cases, women are blessed with a sense that something is wrong. Rarely are they told by God what is wrong, but this instinct tends to be very accurate. You can read more about this in one of my blog posts. Boiling it down to application, it is always my goal to help families and marriages stay together whenever possible. This intervention is designed to allow for the possibility of the family staying together, but at the same time allowing the offended spouse a chance to have some degree of intolerance for the misbehaviors. Simply, whenever the offending spouse has a lost battle, the offender must sleep outside the marital bed. On the first offense, this is 1 night. On the second offense, this is 2 nights. On the third offense, 3 nights, and so forth. The offender sleeps on the floor of the bedroom, on the couch in the other room, or wherever the offended decides. This decision about where to sleep should be made in advance, so that it is not based on emotion. If held too firmly, the addict part of the offender's brain will have to calculate in advance if time on the floor will be worth it. I know it seems remedial, but it cannot be ignored that when an individual behaves in an addictive way, he or she is functioning on a less than adult level of maturity and is best interacted with on a less than adult level. I do not think the offended spouse should behave without dignity, nor be disrespectful, but the offended party should be allowed to have some safety space for increasing amounts of time if the offender is not able to get it under control. One of two things will happen. Either the person with the addiction will get sick of not being able to sleep in his or her own bed and will start to do whatever it takes to correct the addictive behavior, or if the addictive behavior persists, the offended party is granted more and more safety. Eventually, if the couple is spending as many as 30 days in a row apart, then the condition of the marriage is more easily observed, and the long-term condition of the marriage should be seriously reevaluated. What should a wife be allowed to expect from her husband in the area of sexuality? She should be able to expect him to gain complete mastery over his sexual urges. She should be able to expect him not to use her to get his fix. She should be allowed to expect to not be emotionally abused, no matter how much discomfort he feels when he must go without, especially if he is in recovery. Helping a guy out by providing him with a sexual experience right after he is emotionally unpleasant with his wife is like buying a candy bar for a child after he throws a tantrum in the grocery store checkout line. She should be allowed to experience sexuality as an edifying experience, an activity that brings a sense of peace, joy, and closeness to both her and her spouse. For more detail on this, read my book, And the Man Knew His Wife. In my experience, women do not require perfection from their men, but almost all of them are drawn to a man who is making valiant efforts to improve himself, while at the same time are being kind to her no matter how difficult life experiences get. The double burn victim scenario. It is not uncommon for me to work with a couple who is experiencing what I call the double burn victim scenario. Imagine two people who care about each other getting caught in a house fire. Both receive third-degree burns over a high percentage of their bodies. After being rushed to the emergency room, they find themselves in the same hospital room, wrapped tightly in bandages, awaiting the time it takes to heal. Usually there are hospital staff members there to care for their needs. But in this short-handed hospital, there are times when each starts to experience needs. For instance, let's pretend she starts experiencing significant thirst. She assesses her situation and concludes that she does not have what it takes to get a glass of water for herself. She does not see the extent of her husband's burns, so she asks him to get a glass of water for her. He loves her and wants to do things for her, so he tries the best he can to get a glass of water for her. With bandaged hands, he fills a cup with water and takes it to her. As he gets close, he accidentally bumps her wounds, and she screams out in pain, smacking his bandaged hands and knocking the cup of water to the ground. He retreats back to his hospital bed and comes to the conclusion that she is ungrateful. See if I ever help her again. This pattern can go the other way as well. I have never had third-degree burns, but I hear that they are so painful it is hard to think about much of anything else. The psychological burns that people experience before coming into my office are equally painful. The pain is so deep in most cases that each comes to the logical conclusion that my pain must be worse than his or her pain because it is impossible for someone to be in more pain than I am in. Then comes the who is to blame element. In most cases, one person is letting natural gas leak into the room while the other lights a match. Each by itself is not destructive, but then comes the if you hadn't, then I wouldn't have. This goes back and forth for as long as each will let it, often escalating to another blow-up that hurts both before it is over. It makes my stomach cringe as I think about all the times I have heard people say things to their loved one. I was mean to you because you were mean to me first. Kind of reminds you of an elementary school playground, doesn't it? In order to overcome the double burn victim scenario, it helps to look at the steps a doctor would take to help the two people in this analogy. 1. Neither really knows how much pain or trauma the other is experiencing. To recover, each needs to acknowledge that the other person may have wounds that are deeper and wider than perceived. 2. Each has to assume that the other person is doing the best they can. Nobody likes to stay in pain. Some couples I work with conclude that their partner likes to be in pain just so they can rub it in or hold a grudge. 3. Each has to do all they can to heal and recover without help of the other. In the hospital, you go to the doctor to help you recover from burns, not to the spouse. With psychological and emotional trauma, go to a professional, books, and/or God. Don't ask for help from your partner until they offer it. See number 4. Assume that if they are not offering help, it is because they are still too traumatized. 4. If you start feeling better and stronger, offer assistance to the other. Proceed with caution. You don't want to re-injure your loved one by accident. You don't want to get hurt when you are trying to be helpful. Before proceeding, remember you could accidentally bump an old wound, and if you do, he or she will probably react or scream. If you can't handle the reaction without getting upset yourself, then it may be best not to reach out and offer help yet. 5. Avoiding coming to the conclusion that, quote, there is no good reason for you to be in pain, unquote. Sometimes I hear, I have done everything humanly possible to meet your needs or eliminate your pain, and I still get my efforts slammed in my face. What is the point in trying? Another part of this is, why don't you explain to me what I am doing that is hurting you? The unspoken statement is, if you can't explain it, then it's not real. Another common question is, what do you need? These last two questions usually require a medical degree to answer accurately. Your spouse is only guessing why they are still hurting and what they need. Don't get frustrated when they cannot answer your questions intelligently or if they change their mind often. 6. Be patient. Because we have a tendency to underestimate the healing process other people go through, we can become impatient. Besides, it is inconvenient for us when they are incapacitated. If you would get over this faster, my life would be easier. Don't worry. Humans hate being in pain. They are more dedicated to healing and recovering than you are.